where you're supposed to be. Now is the time to leave. No one leaves. Perfect. Thank you. My name is Tammukka, and why am I talking about this? I've been doing cosplay for a few years now. I also work in games, so 3D modeling and cosplay are both very dear to my heart. And let's get started. So why would you 3D model for cosplay? First of all, let's go through some use cases. Of course, we have the obvious 3D printing. This is what people often think when they think about 3D modeling for cosplay. And because this is such an obvious use case and it's such a versatile one, this is our kind of, this is how we are approaching the topic today. But the things that you will learn today can be used in any other types of use cases as well. Next, we have patterns. This could be making patterns for fabric. This could be making patterns for foam. I personally not made foam patterns with my own 3D models, but I've made patterns for fabric, like plushies and parts of costumes. Then yardage, counting yardage. This is technically something you could do in any software where you can draw shapes and they have measurement, but I love Blender, so I happen to do this in Blender. Then we have competition media. So I also do cosplay competitively, and there you often, if you have a show as part of the competition, you need background media, and I've done some 3D animations and backgrounds with Blender. Then scale exploration. This is especially handy if you have a prop where part of the prop is built on an existing piece of material. For example, if you have a staff and you have a wooden dowel, so you can explore if you have to fudge the scale of the rest of the prop to fit the dowel so it looks nice and it looks as close to the reference as you can. This can also help if you have a model of a human that's roughly your size or like even your height. And then you can see, like, would that 2.5 meter prop really look realistic? Like, should I do it that way or should I make it a bit smaller? But these are also just like some use cases that we have. And what will we be using today? We'll be using Blender, of course, my beloved. And this is just a quick thing from Wikipedia. Blender is a free and open source 3D computer graphics software suite. It does a lot. There's a reason why they don't call it a 3D modeling software explicitly, because Blender does a lot. And the learning curve can be quite steep in the beginning. So, you know, acknowledge that if you are having a hard time at the very beginning, it's not necessarily because like, oh, I'm so bad at this. No, it is just quite complex software. But when you get used to it, it starts to become like a second nature to you. And what does it actually exactly do? Like 3D modeling, animation, sculpting, VFX rendering, animation, video editing, a lot of stuff, like I mentioned. So just some things, how to approach this whole endeavor of working with Blender. Start small, pick a prop or an object or anything that you are confident that you could maybe do as your first project, or not even your first project. Start with tutorials, but like one of the first projects, because it's very important to get those successes early on, so you can make a prop and say that, oh, I made it. It doesn't have to be anything complex. Just get used to the program. Then ask for help. I've met some very lovely cosplayers through Blender by either like they're asking me for help or I'm asking them for help. And people are often very eager to help, especially people who like Blender. They usually really like Blender and they really like to talk about it. So this is also a very nice way to find community within the cosplay community. And of course, use online resources. I'm sure a lot of you can Google things, but if you cannot, Blender will teach you. I think every time, or like almost every time that I still open Blender, I have to Google something because I forget something. There's a shortcut that I haven't used in a year. So don't take it as a failure that you have to research something. Take it as a natural part of the process. And even if you think that, oh, I know Blender, I don't have to Google anything, please check what's going on with the latest updates. There might be some new things. There might be some updates that are going to make your existing workflows easier. And where to start? How do we approach this? So I have broken this down into 3 parts. First, we have references. Of course, every project, every cosplay starts with a reference. And I will point out some things that are especially important when you are 3D modeling for cosplay. And I guess they would be equally important when working with foam or any other material, but especially important when you're doing 3D modeling. Then we have breakdown. So this is not something that I consciously do anymore as part of my modeling, but this is a nice way to help you understand how I look at references. How do I think about them? How do I approach modeling based on the reference and the use case? And then it's the modeling itself, and this is the meat of the talk, where I will be live modeling on a prop in Blender. So let's start with the references. Here we have a reference image from the anime Son of Frieren. And this is an example of a good reference. It shows the scale, so we can see how the prop, how big it is to compare to the character. We can also see multiple views, so we can see the staff from the front and from the side. This is very handy when 3D modeling. And simple shading. It has some shading, but it's not like a very complex cinematic shot from like a screenshot of a cinematic. So it helps us understand the shapes and how they're trying to portray the three-dimensional object in a 2D image. Then we have another reference. This is from the Legend of Vox Machina. And at quick glance, it looks the same. It looks like, oh, this is, yeah, good reference. But when you go in and you start looking at it more closely, you can actually see that the staff itself is mirrored. So they haven't actually drawn it from the front and the back. And I've done this little red thing to show it. And this is something that if you're not used to looking at references, you might not realize until you're modeling. And then at some point you realize, like, why is this shape not working in 3D? So it's just good to keep in mind that some of these references, probably most of the references you will be looking at, were not made with 3D modeling in mind. Even the Frieren one, when you start actually modeling it, you see that some of the things don't actually line up in a 3D space, because it was not made for 3D, it's meant for 2D, where the artists can fudge and they can kind of cheat a little bit how they want to draw it. And then I've just listed some sources for references. These are usually my primary resources for references. So of course, official art books and sites. These might often include those nice character breakdowns that we saw before. Wikis, which is usually just a collection of those materials in one place, and ArtStation, which is a game industry specific portfolio site. And especially if you're making any game art, or any cosplays based on video games, please search stuff on ArtStation, because they often have official character renders from the artists who work on the original models. And they might even have material breakdowns, and they explain like, oh, I wanted this denim here because this, and this, and they will explicitly tell you about their characters. Or they might even have like wireframes, so you can see how did someone else model this shape. Then complementary resources. This, again, depending on your cosplay, some of these might be your primary ones, but I usually use these to get a better understanding of how does this model or art, prop, whatever, how have they drawn it from different angles. So, well, screenshots, of course, either from an anime or a game. Marketing art, they're usually in a cool pose, so you can see the prop from a cool angle, and figures, and especially if you're starting 3D modeling, figures is a really great resource to see how a shape that you think is impossible has been made into 3D. A good example would be to think about Dragon Ball and the hair that they have. If you just see someone has drawn Goku, what is that hair? But then you can look at figures, and someone has actually made it into a real object that makes sense, to the most part. And next, breakdown. So we have a reference. How do we wanna go about it? Here I have another example of a pretty good reference from League of Legends, and it's the blow dart pipe, whatever. And here, this is how I would look at reference. So it's just a bamboo pipe. It's pretty simple. It's pretty uniform. I would just start from a cylinder and then extrude it and make those indents in there. However, at the top, it does play out a little bit, and it's no longer fully symmetrical on all axes. But I think this is pretty easy to achieve without any fancy anything. I would just take the vertices and just move them around a little bit and achieve this shape. You could do this with a lattice modifier as well, personal preference. And I will go into modifiers later. So plan, start from a cylinder, extrude and scale the joint smaller, and then rotate and scale the top to achieve an asymmetric design. And in this prop, I would want to ignore the leather strap and the feathers, because if I'm making this myself, I want to make that out of like real leather or fake leather or like fabric, and then the feathers, I also want to add them. Like I'm not going to 3D print fabric. Or like, well, in some cases you could, but like I'm definitely not going to 3D print feathers in this context. Then back to freer and staff. Here again, I would break it into two parts. We have the top and we have the bottom. And the top, we can see that it's mirrored on one axis. And the handle, like we did with the blowdart pipe, I would treat it as a cylinder. So again, start from a primitive shape, extrude, and then add the details. So for the handle, start from a cylinder, extrude and scale the details. And for the top, this is a bit more complicated. And there's so many different ways you could approach this. I'm just showing you one approach. I would build a gem and the sticks from cylinders and spheres, because they're just primitive shapes, kind of squished and scaled. So I would start from that. And the crescent I would build from just a flat circle, and then I do another circle inside it, and then I build half of the depth of it, and then I would mirror that. And then there's the little knob at the top, and again, I would just extrude it from a cylinder. So breaking props down like this helps you understand them as parts of a whole, and it doesn't seem so unattainable. It doesn't seem so impossible. Because, oh yeah, to start from the staff, it's just a cylinder. Like that's, you know, you could do that pretty quickly. And then let's move on to the modeling part. And here I will be jumping to Blender. And you can see I already have imported these reference images. You can just add them yourself through this menu. But I've just put them in so we can start from something. And you can see that they have not been named, so let's name them, because this is important. Naming your stuff is very, very important when you start making bigger projects. This is staff side, and then the other one is ref staff front. And now you can't really see the other one because they're overlapping. So let's just rotate this. And we can do that by pressing R, which rotates our reference. But we only want to rotate it on the x-axis, z-axis. So just by pressing R and Z, we can rotate it like this. And then by typing down 90, we have rotated exactly 90 degrees. So this, when you are looking at the model and you're working on it, you can look at it from the front and from the side, and you have both of those views here. And you can maybe see that it is not aligned with the center axis, or like the world origin center. And I like to keep them aligned, just because it makes things easier. Especially beginners often have issues with the mirror modifier if things are misaligned, not necessarily with the origin of the world, but that's just something like things being misaligned with the origin of the world can cause compounding issues later on if you don't realize that you have been centering things there, but not all of them. So to see how we should center this, I will just select this, and let's add some transparency here so we can see what we're doing. And then let's do it for the other one as well. And let's also turn it only on, let me just move this a little bit, turn on only axis aligned. So this means that when we are rotating the camera, we cannot see the reference, but when we look at it from the correct axis, then we can see it. And this just makes it so that when we're looking at our object, the references aren't messing our view. Let's turn it on here as well. And now we can go here, and by pressing G, we can move the object. And again, we only want to move it on this axis. So we can just press G and X to move it. And I'm just gonna like eyeball it so it's there in the center. And then let's do it for this view as well, G and Y. And now that's there. And this is our reference setup. And I will just go here and toggle them so I don't accidentally select them as we're working on the model. And now we can start with the staff. So like I said, let's start from a primitive shape. Let's start from a cylinder. So let's just add a cylinder. Pretty easy. Sometimes cylinder is all you need. I have modeled so many spheres in Blender with different amount of sections so I could make a ball, like a pattern of a ball or a pattern of a pear shape or something. So it doesn't have to be super complex. And here we can see that now we are in object mode. And this means that we are, when we are moving things, we are moving the whole object. And we want to go into edit mode so we can edit the individual vertices. So by pressing tab, we are now in edit mode, and you can know the difference, for example, from the selections that you have available. Like now we can select individual parts of the cylinder, whereas in object mode, we can move the whole object. So let's go to this view and select everything. And by pressing S, we can scale this down. And a lot of the things that you will be doing in Blender are just this. It's just the basic transformations, rotating, scaling, moving. So if you get familiar with these tools in Blender, you can do pretty much anything, eventually, at least. And here, I just want to clean this up a little bit, and let's select these two faces. And by pressing delete, we can delete them. And now I'm in wireframe mode, and this just means that I can see through the object, and this also means that the selection works a bit differently. Like now, if I drag and select all of these vertices, you can see that I have selected all of them. But if I go into solid view and I select them, it only selects the ones that are visible. And this is also something that often trips beginners with Blender. Like why can I sometimes select things and why can I not? So we can now go, and with the things we learned before, by pressing G and Z, we can move this. So let's just get it to the bottom. And again, when we get to here, there's multiple ways you could do it to get these designs here. But how I like to do it is I usually identify the parts where the silhouette is changing, and I put loops there, and then I add the actual silhouette. So here, by pressing E, we can extrude, and that adds more material. And then again, we can log it to the Z-axis. And then let's keep extruding and moving it there. And here you can also see that the image gets very blurry when you're this close. So you just should pay attention to where you aligned the geometry. Like here you can see it's outside of this circle or this donut shape. But here it's kind of on the other side. So I just want to make sure that I follow the same point of the line art for all of these. And now we can go in and select these, and by pressing Shift, by pressing R, no. How do I add loop cuts? No. No, hello, no. Shift R, thank you. No. Control R, thank you. Yes! And this is what I mean when I say, like, I've done this model this week 4 times. I use Blender every week, and sometimes I'm just like, what happens? So now we have added with, was it Control R? Yes, Control R, these loop cuts, and now we can scale them to fit this shape. But you can see when we just scale it, it just goes super tall, and we don't want that. So we want to scale it on all axes, but Z. So we're doing kind of the inverse that we did before, where we move something only on one axis. Now we're excluding one axis. So by pressing, no. Wait. Huh? No? Yes? No? Huh? Yes. So by pressing S and then Shift and the axis we want to exclude, we can scale it or do any transformation on all axes but that one that you have selected. So let's just do it here as well. And here we actually want to scale both of these to get this shape. Oh, come on. There. And here we want to end this on a dome, and you could just like do the same extrusion thing and scale it and extrude and scale it and extrude, but I will show you another way, which I like to do, especially if I want to end something on a dome. So let's move our 3D cursor to selected, and this is just the point where the where you can center transformations, and we can change it here and set the transform pivot point to 3D cursor. And now if I create a sphere, it is created here and not to the center like we created the cylinder at the beginning. So now I will just go here, and we can also turn on snapping, which snaps vertices or whatever to either increments or edges or vertices, and we want to snap this to vertices, and let's turn it on for scaling as well. And now when we scale it, you can see that it matches that. And then we can just delete that and select all the linked here. So let's delete this extra bit as well. And now that we have centered our transformations around this point, we can actually scale and press Z, and it's gonna scale it towards that point and not on the center of the object. And I see that we're missing a loop here, so let's add that as well. Cool. And then I will just quickly do it at the top as well. And this is usually when I'm working on something like this, which is pretty uniform, like these shafts or dowels and things like this, I don't usually mirror anything. I usually just work from the primitive shape and leave the mirroring and the other modifiers for the parts that actually need it. Because oftentimes if you're, I mean, you can work on a like a circular shape with the mirror modifier. It just needs, you just need to be aware of what things you need to set up to make that work. Again, just personal preference. And a lot of the things that you will learn online, some of the things are truly like best practices, like things about topology and naming your things and such. But a lot of the other things are just personal preference. So try to, especially in the beginning, learn from many different sources. And I also don't want to be like, oh, this is the right way. This is not the right way. I don't do this for a living. I just like Blender really much. And here we have reached this part. And if we actually look at that from the other view, we can see that it's not the same. So we can now do the thing where we scale this only on the Z-axis, sorry, X-axis. And then here we can also scale it on the Y-axis. And now if we look at it, we can see that we have this. And usually, like I model characters like this, where you just have a view from the front and you have a view from the side, and you just work from those. With characters especially, you have to go in a bit more and work from these floating angles, because humans are difficult. But for simple shapes like this, I usually just work from these two angles. And now we can add a bit more detail here as well. And I think this is the shaft. We are done here. So let's move on to the top. And like I said, actually, I'll just name this to keep up the good habits. Like I said, we want to mirror this top part because we are working. Otherwise, you'd have to keep track of both of the sides at the same time, and it gets really annoying and complicated. Sometimes when it's a model where that would be beneficial, but it's a super quick thing, I might not use any modifiers. Like for example, here, I'm gonna have to move this in a weird way, and a mirror modifier might be beneficial, but I'm like, it's just a small thing, it's fine. Another thing that we see here that if we look at this, we can see that, wait, that's really low poly. Can you really print this? And your first thought could be, if you've seen any Blender tutorials, like, I want to make it smooth. So let's just go in and let's just shade it smooth. And it's all smooth, right? Not really. 3D printing doesn't care about shading. So here we can see an example. We have two different objects, and we can see it shaded flat, and we can see it shaded smooth. Of course, you think that I want to 3D print a smooth one. Actually, the topology is the same, so how the model is built is the same, and your printer doesn't care. If you use an add-on for creating patterns, that doesn't care. So this is usually something that you need to care about when you're working with games, animation, graphics, for other things. But this is also useful for 3D printing in the sense that I like to switch between these two shading modes, because a smooth shading mode, it's often highlights issues with the model that I haven't realized that only show up when you're using a modifier. For example, there could be a ripped edge in there that I don't see. And when I add like a subdivision modifier, there's suddenly a gaping hole there. And it's like, what have I made here? So it's good to be aware that the shading doesn't affect the end result, but the shading can be a useful tool as you're modeling. Actually, yes, back to Blender. So let's start working on the gem. And here, again, I want to work from the center of this. So I'll just kind of eyeball and click here. So now we have the 3D cursor there, and we can add a sphere. And by going back into the edit mode, we can scale it. And I'm just gonna scale it there. And usually with parts like this, where it has like a direction that the sphere is facing, I like to rotate it so that it's actually looking at you. Again, maybe this doesn't matter for your use case, but I just like to keep things clean. And now let's just scale it a little bit. And then let's add another fun shape, a torus, aka the donut. Let's just rotate it. And let's scale it. And let's see if I remember the shortcut for scaling this properly, or if I have to ask help from the audience. Because you can see as we're scaling it, the whole thing is scaling uniformly. But I might want to scale just the kind of girth of the donut. So let's see, is it Alt-S? Yes, it's Alt-S. Nice, correct on the first try. And now you can see that I can scale the actual donut part. So let's just put it there. And here we can see that this is just, these are floating. You could make this as like a part that's connected. But for 3D printing, you can have these floating parts. But it's just, again, you have to be aware of it when you're working with modifiers. Like, for example, if I now went and subdivided this really far, if they weren't overlapping enough, you could end up with the holes where they meet. But where we do want to actually combine them is here. Because you can see here now with the smooth shading, you can see that something's going on here. These are not connected. So we can just go here, and by pressing M, we can merge them by distance, and we can see that it removed 32 vertices. And now if you look at it, it looks correct. Well, it doesn't look correct, really, but we'll get to that later. So let's continue with this. And like I said, those small parts we will be building from dowels. So let's just add, or cylinders, sorry. Let's just add a cylinder and again clean it up and remove these because we don't need them and they could be causing us issues later on with the modifiers. Oh. And actually I will turn off the not proportional editing, the snapping. And I'm gonna be lazy and make it just from 1. Illegal. I'm gonna have this much hidden geometry. How terrible. And then I can just duplicate it and rotate it. And here I don't need all of this extra, so let's just scale it down. No. Actually, we might want to move that because it's showing through there. So I just hid that part. Oh. But yeah, this is very like, oh, it's so cool doing 3D models, and then I'm just quiet and I'm looking at things. I'm like nudging things around a little bit, and then I nudge them to the other side, and then I nudge them back. But this is it. It's pretty tedious, but I do like the manual labor aspect of it and how when you get familiar with it enough, you don't really have to think. You just do. Especially if you have a good reference. When you have bad reference, then you have to do a bunch of designing, and I don't want to be designing when I'm making a cosplay. I just want to copy an existing design. And let's actually make the knob at the same time. Oh. Let's scale it here. And here we could also end this on a sphere and then kind of squish it. But I know that knowing the model and knowing the scale of this, I know it's going to be super tiny. So I'm just going to end it in a bunch of tiny triangles. And again, we can press M to merge and merge at the center. Oh. And that is that. And then we can go, well, actually, we can see that we created this without any modifiers. This is just created like this, but the crescent shape I do want to use a modifier for. And what are modifiers? Well, we can go here. And I'm using Blender 3.6. If you download the latest, this menu is going to look a little different. The modifiers, I think, are the same still, but know that the UX is just a little different. So here we have this menu with a bunch of these. It's a lot. I don't even know what most of these do. This is insanity. Don't worry. I have collected the most used modifiers, and I have explained them what they do. So these are ways to build part of the model automatically, to do something to the model that you can then adjust and you can then go back on and redo your changes. And these are very useful in many parts of 3D modeling. First, we have the mirror modifier, which is pretty clear. It just mirrors things. You can mirror them on multiple axes, and you can change the origin of where the mirroring happens. Then subdivision surface. This adds more detail. This just subdivides the model and usually makes things just smoother. Again, these two I use in pretty much every model that I work on. Then Boolean, a bit more rare, but I still use this quite a lot. So this cuts holes in other models by using other models. So you can make holes. So for example, I have this handle part, and let's say I wanted to make a hole in it so the shaft would actually fit through it. So when I'm building this prop, I would only have to model this and print this handle part, and then a real wooden dowel would fit through. And then array plus curve, you can use this, or like especially array, you can just use it as is or with other modifiers. But this just makes things so that you can make one part, one segment of something, then you can just make an array of it, so just duplicate it automatically, and then you can bend it on a curve. So let's say you were making like a gas mask and it had like a really, this kind of hose thing attached to it. You could use this. Array is also very useful in other instances. Like let's say you're making a car tire and you only want to model one segment of the car tire thingy. So then you can just like duplicate it in a way that you couldn't with a mirror modifier, perhaps. And bevel, especially useful for weapons and stuff. It just adds this little bevel on the edges. It's quite subtle here. I don't use it that much because I don't do that many weapons. When I'm like, my characters are cute anime girls. I don't do guns. I do guns sometimes. And then lattice. This is a very specific use case, but here I have modeled this hair clip in like flat against the reference, and then with the lattice modifier, which there's this lattice, I don't know if it's really visible there, it's this kind of grid that you can deform and move. So I can build this model flat, and then with the modifier, I can bend it into shape. So I don't have to try to keep track of all these intricate details as I'm modeling it in a weird curve. This will introduce some distortion to the model, so you should be aware of that. It's usually, depending on the scale of your model, it might not be super noticeable. Like here, I tried to fudge the distortion a little bit by hand, but just be aware that it does add some distortion. And we can go back to Blender. So let's create, I will move the 3D cursor back, back here. And I will start building the crescent shape. And we're starting from a circle, just a circle. And let's rotate it. And I'm gonna scale it to match this outer edge. Again, you could do this in many different ways. You could do this with the array modifier and the curve tool. But I'm just gonna show you this way. Let's duplicate it and move it to the inner part. And then I will delete these extra bits here that we don't need. And let's close this up. And in objects like this, it's just easier if you can keep it so that the top or like the outer part and the inner part have the same amount of vertices. That makes it easy to link things up together and connect things. You don't again have to do, but you just have to be aware that you might have to do some magic with the topology to make it work. So let's just add these so it is all nice and even. And then on the other side as well. Nice, and now let's just go and fill this in. Wow, that's always my favorite part. And then I also tried to move this manually a little bit, so these would be not as slanted. I try to keep these quads as rectangle-ish as I can. Again, in a model like this, it doesn't matter that much really, but it's just good to learn. Good to be aware of the somewhat best practices and stick to them. It doesn't really matter with this model, to be honest. But a lot of these things that are more important for other types of modeling, they will also help you when you're doing props for 3D printing. And then let's add some loop cuts here. And let's go to this view. And we can now add some depth. Wow. We have half of a crescent. And now let's go and add the mirror modifier. And we can see that, oh, that's the wrong way. Luckily, that's an easy fix. And we can just mirror it on the y-axis. And then also if I move these, you can see that they're getting disconnected. So let's just turn on clipping. And there's a hole here. Why is there a hole? Hole be gone. And hole be gone. So now when we look at this, we look at the reference, we can see that it's actually thinner at the end. And what we could do is just take these parts and move them individually. But we can actually use the proportional editing tool at the top here to help us. So if I now move this, you can see that I have this circle that shows the area of influence, and I can move this. So let's also turn it to connected only, so it doesn't affect anything we don't want it to affect. And now on the side view, we can go and move it here. And then by using the mouse scroll wheel, we can adjust the area of influence. And in this case, it works nicely here. I wasn't expecting it to, and this was a really nice find when I was preparing for this talk. And now we can see that it already has a much nicer shape. And then we can do it here as well. And move it like so, and change that. And then I do also want to go in and adjust these manually a bit more, because I want this to be a bit more drastic. But now you can see the why the mirror modifier is so useful. Oh, come on. Because otherwise I would have to do it here, and then I would have to do it here, or I would have to select both of them and then scale it. It is just easier to do it this way. And just for the fun of it, let's turn smooth shading on here as well. And again, it's looking very low poly. We didn't really solve that. We just know that the smooth shading doesn't solve that. So how do we solve it? With modifiers, of course. So let's add a subdivision surface modifier, and let's crank it up a little bit. So now you see that it is smooth. However, we have lost the definition. And you have a couple of ways of getting that back. One is to add more geometry. In some cases, this is what you want to do. And so you see it's getting a bit sharper, but this becomes difficult to edit. So what I like to do in cases like this, I like to select this whole thing and add a crease. And this just tells some modifiers of how they should do and what they should do. And let's check that that is at 1, and it is. So let's add a crease here as well. And I will show you the difference. That now that I crank it up, you see that there's this clean line, but there's not a clean line at the top here. And please do not crank up the subdivision modifier. Your computer will cry. So 4 is the highest I can go with here. And I don't usually have it visible ever when I'm modeling. I just like toggle it on every now and then to see what I'm doing. But it's heavy on the computer, and it makes it difficult to see what you're doing, at least with the default view that Blender has for subdividing stuff. And then let's go down, 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 down. And let's just select all of these. And add a crease. And now we can see that it's looking like we wanted. And let's actually add the modifier to these as well. So here, because we made these two objects so overlap so much, we don't see a hole in here. But if you had a gap in between these two, I would just go in and edit them and scale them up so they would overlap. Again, personal preference. And now we can see that with the the subdivision surface, we could actually maybe scale this a little, because the smoothing is making it a bit smaller than we want. And it is very, I used to be the kind of person who was very like pressed with exact measurements and like no, every part has to be to a certain millimeter or a certain centimeter. And you know, I did maybe get some satisfaction out of this, but it is not exact. And even if you think that, oh no, they're gonna see that these two things are not exactly, no, they're not. As long as it looks okay, you don't have to be super accurate. Again, depending on the use case, if you're making a functional part, then yes, it needs to be, but then why are you modeling it in Blender? That should be a CAD model. I mean, you can, I do it and then I cry. That why didn't I do CAD stuff? And like this is like, if I now were to go in and finish this model, I would just be doing another hour of this, like nudging things a little bit. And let's actually connect these parts, because yeah, now we see here that this ends here when we're looking at it from this angle, but it ends here from this angle. So it does like this, the picture is just wrong. Well, it's not wrong. It is useful for the people it was made for, which is animators. But for a 3D modeler, this is wrong, and I don't like it. So we just have to, go in and just manually fudge it a little bit. Actually, I wanna, and this is where I'm saying like, oh yeah, maybe I should have a mirror modifier here. But oh, it's so easy. It's so little stuff. I don't need a mirror modifier. And then I cry. Because now I'm constricted kinda to working only from the front or the side, because it's really difficult to like select the corresponding vertex from the other side when you're not looking at it head front or from the side. And then let's just go and scale this so they go in there nicely. And also you can just see me switch between different views and between different selection modes and stuff. So this is what I kind of mean when I say that even if we are now thinking about 3D printing, I mean, it doesn't really show up as we're modeling, but it's good to be aware that that's what this would be. These basic skills will be useful no matter what you do with Blender. As long as you're comfortable with moving the camera, selecting things, moving things, scaling things, rotating things, it is going to be useful for you no matter what you do. Also, one thing that I will say that's not really related to the software itself, but the hardware that you have, having a numpad on your keyboard makes Blender great. It does mean that you cannot buy the cute, really small mechanical keyboards, which makes me sad. But having a numpad will help with navigation, because, for example, here I'm doing this move with the numpad, and you can look at it from the top and from the bottom. And let's imagine I didn't look at it from this angle, because I really don't like how the crescent looks here when you look at that from the top. But this is also why it's useful to, even if the reference is only from the front and from the side, to just move it and rotate it. And especially if you ever want to model like a little figurine of a character or something, the cheeks are often something that lose the shape and they lose the kind of plumpness when you're working from those two angles. So often you have to go in and look at it from many different angles to kind of get that fullness back in. I don't know why I would be modeling a human face for cosplay specifically. Maybe it could be a mask, who knows. But just another example why being comfortable moving the camera around is a really nice skill. And also, I don't know the shortcuts. That's why I have the search binded to the space. So I can just press it and like, oh, subdivision, something, edge maybe. Which also maybe is the reason why I haven't learned the shortcuts, because I'm relying on the search. But I don't care. Let me scale this. Turn off the proportional editing. Oh. And let's align this to the crescent as well. Again, like this shape makes no sense. What's happening here? Why are you no? Also, I will note that by default, I think still the amount of undos you can do Blender is limited. So I would recommend that if you're downloading Blender, that you adjust that setting, because you will be sad if you make a mistake that you can't undo because you forgot to change the setting for the number of undos in Blender. And here again, I'm regretting not having a mirror modifier. But I am too stubborn to add it now. And this shape is just... I'm sure there's a way to make this all work nicely in 3D, but it's just gonna look real weird. And again, if I was actually making this for cosplay, oftentimes for like any model that I'm working on, I have multiple versions of it. Like up here, I actually need to rename this to gem and top. And like this, I'm like, oh, I'm not happy with this. So I would just hide it and do it again. And then I can go back and forth between the different objects and see how I feel about it and which one I like and such. But for like a first try, I said like, okay, I tried this approach. Maybe I don't like it, but that's fine. You know, we can just do another one. And this, I don't know if you saw it, this was the first time I saved this during the talk. So save often. And sometimes, like, yes, I have versions of the different parts of the model within the scene collection here. Sometimes if I do like a really big change or I want to apply the modifiers, which means that they become non-editable and they apply the changes to the mesh itself, I might make an actual copy of the file, just so I have it if I need to go back on something. Especially with modifiers, I do like to make a copy of the thing before I apply the modifiers, if I have to apply the modifiers. But I think we have a nice staff here. You know, it's not the prettiest maybe, but it's mine, and I love it. So we are now done with the modeling. What have we learned? Collect your references, pay attention to your references, and make sure that if you're lacking a proper reference, you're aware of it, and you can be prepared to make those design choices yourself. And then be open to learning new things, ask people for help, search for stuff online. Especially nowadays, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of stuff for Blender, like tutorials specifically for cosplay and Blender. And try to learn the things that you want to do in Blender. Like this was a tip I heard from an artist like just yesterday who does hard surface modeling for a living. And he said that, oh, you shouldn't look at the donut tutorial because are you going to be making donuts? Like find something you want to make and start from that, because it teaches you the relevant skills, and it also keeps you excited. I don't want to make a donut. I mean, I want to eat a donut. I don't want to make them. But that's it for the talk. That's it for my part. So we have around 12 minutes for questions. Thank you. Scary. Yes, please wait a second. We'll get a mic to the audience.
Yeah.
Great. Was there someone questions? Yes. Just pick someone.
Thank you for the great talk. My question was regarding the scale of the model. So you mentioned about like scaling everything so that it's like proportionate to how big the prop or whatever is actually going to be. So did you sort of when you brought in the reference, so is that when you make the scaling? So you scale the reference model to be the correct size and then start working on it?
So this is again a question where the answer is it depends. It's up to your preference. Usually if it's a simple model and I know I'm not going to have a bunch of parts that I have to join together, I usually just throw in the reference and then scale it as it's ready. But that's something you could do at the beginning as well. Just be aware that if it's a complex model, you might have to be careful with some of the things if you're scaling it after the fact. And that can also affect how some of the modifiers work. Like if the modifier says that, oh, I'm going to round something by 5 centimeters, of course, it's not going to be correct when you have scaled it. So I do it maybe the wrong way, really. But you could do it either way. And if you're gonna take something from this, I guess scale it when you start and don't do it like me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes? Please wait for the mic. Yes, thank you.
What's your preferred approach to printing objects that are too large to print in one part? Would you print it in multiple parts and how would you join them together?
I bought a bigger printer. No, that is something that I've experimented a little bit. Again, really boring answer, depends on the model. Like if it's a really small one, like you saw the key that I modeled, that was the example for the mirror modifier. That had some parts that I printed it in multiple parts, not because it was too big, but because I wanted to be able to sand it in separate parts. So that one, there was no dowels, there was no indents. They were just sitting flush against each other. And I just melted a piece of needle into it and then heated it up again and then melted the other part on it and put some like super glue in between it. I tried using dowels, so not in Blender, but in your 3D splicing software. I would then splice the model and there add little dowels. Usually I would do them in a way that it has negatives on both sides and then a separate piece of dowel, because that makes printing it easier because you have a flat surface to print it on. But if you have the other part, like a piece of puzzle, the other one has the nub and the other one has the hole, you can't print the nub hole flush with the surface. So I usually leave it until the slicing software and then choose what fits for the model. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? There's at the back.
Okay, so I have, let's think about the scanner that I have the offset that I want to print. It's finished, and in Blender the scale is correct, but when I take it to the printing slicer, the sizing is way off. It's not like. So what do I need to do that I get the actual scale from Blender to the slicer without like rescaling it again?
So this is a very common problem with Blender and like exporting things from Blender is understanding the scale of the exports. Like I've run into the same issue with 3D printing and with game art and stuff. And this is depends a little bit on the file type that you have. But for all of them, when you're exporting the model from Blender, there is a settings menu for the scale and like which scale does it use, and there you can multiply the scale. For sometimes I think with STLs, I might be completely wrong. I said I have to Google things. This is the thing I have to Google every time. I think you have to multiply the scale by 100 or something. But it is very tricky, and especially also, this is not as important for 3D printing, but for game art, that Blender export at least used to also mess up the rotation of the model. And there we had to do some hijinks to kind of unrotate it in Blender to get it. But this is just a very common Blender export thing, depending on the file type. But the export menu has settings, and I recommend you Google the correct setting for your file type and just play around with which scale it uses and manually scale it in the export setting if needed. Yes. Any other questions? No? Yeah.
So is there anything in particular about, like, was it 3.6 that you were using that you prefer and haven't moved on to the like newer versions? Because I had the exact same thing where there's still things about 2.79 that I prefer personally. So I was wondering if there's something in particular about 3.6 that you like.
Not really anything particular I like. I mean, the usual installation that I have is like 2 point something, really. It's just any version that is before the UX overhaul that they did.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just, I do also have 4 point somethings installed on my computer, and I've done some of the geometry node stuff there. But it's just what I've used to, and I haven't had a reason to really upgrade fully to a newer version. I've just had parallel installations, and I use the new features on the new one when I need, and then I'm like, I don't like this, I'm going back to the old one, and then I do my usual stuff in the old one. So I'm just stubborn, that's it,
Yes.
really.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, I thank you all for your time, and I will be here for a little bit if you want to chat with me, and have a lovely Desucon, everyone.